Reporting on federal parliament, certainly in my view, is as good as it gets for a dedicated journalist. It ticks all the boxes. You're in the centre of the action, inside the intrigue and surrounded by those who shape the nation's destiny. In the background, though, there's the love-hate relationship with the media by some political leaders, and there are the inside stories of hits and misses by members of the gallery and the constant search for the scoop that will send the other reporters into panic. Recently retired gallery legend Laurie Oakes still is credited with scoring the scoop of the century. 1980, the car park of a Canberra hotel, and a deep-throat informant hands Oakes a sheaf of papers. Treasurer John Howard's budget speech.
The unemployed and home buyers will benefit most from Tuesday's federal budget, and that's not guesswork. The 10 Network's federal roundsman Laurie Oakes has obtained complete details of the forthcoming budget.
Well, we don't have to wait until Tuesday night to find out what's in Mr John Howard's budget. It's been leaked. And the surprise is that even though there's a federal election just round the corner, the budget is a fairly tough one, much tougher than anyone expected. According to the estimates Mr Howard will give Parliament, government spending will rise by 13.7% during 1980-81, but revenue collections will rise even more, by 16.2%. And as a result, for the first time since 1973, there'll be a domestic surplus.
Treasurer John Howard announced that there was to be an immediate inquiry by federal police.
It is apparent that there has been provision of extensive details of this year's budget. That is, to me personally, a deeply disturbing matter and a matter of very great concern to the government.
So I suppose I'll hear something in the next few days, but no, I haven't been approached so far by anybody.
What will you be able to tell them if they do approach you?
I'll be able to tell them very little, David, and under the journalist's code of ethics, I'm compelled to protect my sources, and I'll do so. Well, I can say that I was given a fairly comprehensive briefing by someone who clearly knew a great deal of the detail in the budget, and I spent a couple of days checking it, and it proved to be spot on.
Queensland's long-serving Premier, Joh Bjelke-Petersen, held an equally long-running dislike for journalists in his home state and an absolute abhorrence of those working federal Parliament's press gallery.
So Joh Bjelke-Petersen had an incredible relationship with the media. I mean, it was very much a love-hate relationship. He used to always say that we need to feed the chooks every day, and he had a press secretary called Alan Callaghan who was very adept at the craft. And so they would drip feed. They would drip feed the media, and of course he had some journalists who were very pro Bjelke-Petersen because, of course, they give the stories to those particular journalists.
But when reporters strayed away from the chook pen, Joh reacted with disdain, as ABC reporter John Austin found out.
You're wasting my time, Friday. Off you go. We were to talk about the Crown of Thorns, John. I'm not going to go into political ones in relation to Fitzgerald inquiry, OK? Finished. No.
The matter of Cal deal. Is it true that you still have $270,000?
I'll talk to you after the Fitzgerald inquiry, John. And if you're a gentleman, and if you can stick to the truth, you know what the session was to be on. It was to be on the Crown of Starthorns. Now, if you're a gentleman, you stick to that.
No, I'm interested in your opinions as a leader, sir.
Yes, I know. I'll tell you after the inquiry is over and everything is finished, John, I will talk to you then if you like, but you'll pay me a lot of money for it.
You don't want to give your suggestions as to whether Mr Ahern should prosecute following the Fitzgerald inquiry?
John, you can talk as much as you like. I've got to go before the inquiry, as you know. Now, I've given you a good spin, John. Go for your life.
All right, Sir Chair, thanks.
Last time you'll ever talk to me.
Commercial media also received its share of controversy and cross-examination. In 1991, politicians hauled media mogul Kerry Packer before a parliamentary committee as Canadian Conrad Black began his campaign to take control of the Fairfax media empire. Packer met fire with fire.
Kerry Francis Bullmore Packer. I appear here this afternoon reluctantly. If you think I'm going to be railroaded and sit here and be told that you're going to change the laws and you're going to push me around, you're either going to have to believe me or call me a liar.
What the Four Corners program suggested was not that you were evading tax at all, that would have been libellous, but that you were minimising tax.
There's nothing wrong with minimising tax. I don't know anybody who doesn't minimise their tax.
And that you were doing so in ways that were contrary to the spirit of the law.
Oh. Well, I just got through telling you what I thought about that, and what you're saying is exactly what the Four Corners program says. I am not evading tax in any way, shape or form. Now, of course I am minimising my tax, and if anybody in this country doesn't minimise their tax, they want their heads read. Because as a government, I can tell you, you're not spending it that well that we should be donating extra. Now, that's the damage you're doing, changing the rules every single day. And I think the people out there whose jobs have been up against the wall don't thank you for it.
Former PM Bob Hawke earned an early reputation for manipulating impertinent reporters.
You're being very hedgy on this one, is it an awkward one? You want to say that I'm being hedgy because you've got a recent record of achievement in producing some bombshells out of questions and answers with which I've been associated, but I think you're going to have to draw a blank on this one.
And really fired up when the late Richard Carlton questioned his ethics.
Mr Hawke, could I ask you whether you feel a little embarrassed tonight at the blood that's on your hands?
You're not improving, are you? I thought you'd make a better start to the year than that. It's a ridiculous question. You know it's ridiculous. I have no blood on my hands. I was not involved in the discussions that Bill Hayden's fellow leaders had with him. I hope the standard of your questioning improves.
Mr Hawke, then how do you expect the electorate to believe that you were not party to the plotting that's been going on for the past fortnight?
If it's a question, Mr Carlton, of the electorate having to believe between your stupidity in such a question as that and my integrity, I have no doubt where their belief will fall. I had no knowledge of any meeting this morning. I had an indication yesterday that perhaps by the end of this week, Mr Hayden may make a decision. When I went into that executive this morning, I had no knowledge whatsoever that he was making his decision. Now, Mr Carlton, you can sit there with your silly, quizzical face. You've got a reputation right around this country. Yeah, it's looking better still. You've got a reputation for your impertinence, your refusal to accept people at their face value, to try and ridicule the integrity of people. Now, I don't mind my integrity being on the line against yours.
But Hawke also enjoyed being the centre of press adulation.
Warwick Wertler from the Macquarie Radio Network. Mr Hawke, your opponent, Mr Fraser, told us yesterday that we'd been biased in our reporting of this campaign.
Shame on you.
How much have you been helped by the honeymoon that you have enjoyed during this campaign?
I tell you what, it's a long honeymoon. I've been around in public life since the early 60s. If it's a honeymoon, it's about time we consummated it.
And particularly enjoyed the limelight when he backed a winner.
I tell you what, any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up today is a bum.
While Hawke's protagonist in the 1983 election, Malcolm Fraser, also faced some rugged questions.
Laurie Oakes, Network 10, Prime Minister. I'm tempted to ask the same question again for the third time because we still haven't got an answer, but I guess you're not going to answer it. So instead, sir, could I ask you whether you are going to debate Mr Hawke? In the last American presidential election, President Carter initially refused to debate Mr Reagan, changed his mind when he discovered from the polls that he was likely to lose.
Well, I'm delighted. I'm absolutely delighted to see that Laurie Oakes has maintained his record right through this election. He hasn't changed his spots one little bit. It's perfectly plain that the Australian Labor Party is going out after the financial institutions to fund its programs in a massive scale. $4,000 billion of additional funding. And if you can't oh, well, that's a good bipartisan approach. Bull comes from the press gallery.
Particularly during the abortive 1987 Joe for PM campaign, which later morphed into the Joe for Canberra campaign.
He felt that he'd be a better bet in Canberra. He felt that he could be better than Hawke, Keating or John Howard during that particular period. So he launched his own Joe for PM campaign. Now, of course, it was ill-fated. It didn't get off the ground, but it caused enormous harm to the Conservative vote in Australia back in the late 80s. In fact, many suggest that it cost John Howard victory back in 87.
I say to Joe, and you can pass this on to him, I would really deeply welcome him in Canberra.
Why is that, Mr.
But I'd have to say to him, so that the message is complete, as much as I would welcome him, it wouldn't be a trifecta. It wouldn't be a trifecta in which it was Hawke and Howard and Sinclair welcoming him. Johnny and Ian don't want him. I do.
Why do you want him?
Because I think he would add a lovely dimension to the federal parliament. And he would cause the Liberals and the National Party, I was going to swear, a lot of trouble.
I do not accept any blame. I never intend to, never have to. There's no reason to accept the blame. The only thing I blame myself for is that I didn't continue to go myself, because every poll that we had indicated that we would go up 3 or 4% every time my personality or my running presented itself. But when it was taken out, we went down.
Joe's campaign came in the wake of the 1983 election, a poll that brought out the best and worst of Australian politicking and a change of Labor leadership.
Bill Hayden was the opposition leader. It looked like Malcolm Fraser would lose. On the eve of the election being called, Bob Hawke ousted Bill Hayden, who did the famous press conference where he was obviously very angry about it and said basically a drover's dog could have beaten Malcolm Fraser. So he was very bitter, but obviously Bob Hawke went on to win convincingly.
Joe and wife Flo died without clearing the former Premier's name of this corruption smear. His passing left a legacy of suspicion in Queensland and a feast for political satirists.
So, Joe, have you ever taken a bribe?
Oh, well, you know that's wrong. You know, I've never done that. That you are wrong, Yana. You are wrong. You know that. You know you are wrong. You're wrong, 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 wrong.
So you're saying I'm wrong?
No, I'm not saying that. There you go again.
In the next episode of Power Plays, we'll examine how Joe Bjelke-Petersen manipulated the Senate and changed the way politics is played in Australia now and perhaps far into the future.